I have 16 rules for living, 10 personal, and 6 for the organization that I lead.
The organizational values are shared with me, Alex, and the rest of our team.
The personal values are for myself and my family.
Today, we're going to go through each of the 16 rules together.
Plus, we'll talk about some exercises you can use to develop your own rules for living, but also why you might not want to do any of this at all in the first place. Well, hey there, and welcome to the Pro Church Tool Show. We're here to help you and your church navigate the biggest communication shift in 500 years. I'm Brady Shearer, your host. I'm joined as always by my co-host. We call him Bishop Breaststroke. It's Alexander Mills.
Hello.
We are here in the year of our Lord, 2024, and recently I shared our company values in a social post, and I got a number of questions in response. Where can we see your full list of company values? And how do we create our own? So we wanted to dedicate this episode to going through our company values, but then also sharing an exercise on how we develop these and how you might be able to develop your own. Now, before we get into the actual values specifically, a few important notes. Number one, this is a living document. Values get added as needed. There was a time last year where something was brought up. I remember specifically, but I'm not really in the mood to disclose it today. The team came to me and they said, "Why are you the way that you are?" And we had to add a new value to the list. Do you recall this?
I don't recall this, actually.
Okay. It was
clearly, it didn't hurt me as much as it hurt you.
Yes. So the point is that once you create your values, they don't need to be the 10 Commandments on stone, can't remove, can't add.
Right.
They are meant to be a living document. You're going to change. Your church is going to change. Your organization is going to change. And so it's okay to add upon these. Hey, we haven't done it yet. I'm sure it's all right to even remove a value.
Wow.
You know what? This is a little too much integrity.
Yes.
I'm going to backtrack a bit. Second note, this is less about what we do and more about how we do it. When you're writing your values, you don't want them to be aligned with a specific goal or outcome.
Sure.
Don't worry about the output, more be concerned with the input and control what you can control.
Yeah.
Thirdly, I would not recommend, and this is perhaps why we have not done an episode dedicated to this so far, I would not recommend that you lift these values and copy them for yourself.
Right.
Because these are very specific to us. Again, we have an exercise that we'll get to for developing your own. Now, that's not to say that you can't pull some of like the larger truths from it, but unlike most things, and I had a bit difficulty preparing this episode, unlike most things where I'm like, here's your 3-step framework. Don't worry, I got one. But it was a little more challenging to get to. These were like part of like things that were just very personal to me.
I mean, even the language of some of these values is like, it's not going to resonate with your church likely or your organization, because these came up and out of who we are and how we talk and what we talk about. And so that's just to say, and like I said, as this episode unfolds, you'll see how this will work out for your church and how your values will come up and out of what you're doing. And so that's just to say, like, this is not a template that you can copy and paste as far as the values go, but there is a process to go through to come up with your own values that will resonate with your team, your work, your organization, your church.
Note number 4, there are 5 notes here, we're almost done. Values can serve as a superior alternative to goals. So here we are at the beginning of a new year, and in my 20s, most of the notes that I would make at the beginning of the year were dedicated to, this is what I want to accomplish. And as I got a bit older, I shifted a bit to less about what I wanted to accomplish and more about like the effort that I wanted to give.
Well, and that's to what you said earlier. These values are less about what we do and more about how we do them. So instead of setting goals for, I want to do these things A, B, and C throughout the year, it's in all the things I do, I want to do them this way.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. So it's less about what we are accomplishing and more about who we are becoming and how we're choosing to live. And then finally, number 5, beware of doing something like this. I promise you that it is fun. Beginning of the year, you're going to, on day 1, you're like, you know what? I'm going to write down these values. Maybe you share them with your team the way I did. And everyone's like, wow, profound. These are great. Then comes another day where you have to actually live by these values. And you go, wait a minute.
When did we say that?
I got all my credit when everyone was like, great values. Oh, thanks for leading us. Now I have to actually live by these values. Becomes less easy. So you know what? Maybe wait till 2025 to install these.
Take some time.
Hey, just make sure. Because for me, I review these every year. And I say, how am I living by these? And if not, what do I need to make a change? In respect to, because I have defined like my life, I want to live by these rules. If I'm not, that's like the ultimate indictment upon yourself. Like you're lying to yourself.
And you actually just said something profound there about this, like philosophically. You said, as a person, as an individual, how am I living by these? And that's what this is all about, is personifying these values as a leader from the top down, not just handing out values to your team that you want to see them live out, but you embodying them first and foremost, so that you set the tone, you set the culture, you set the example as a leader, and surely people will notice and follow along. But if you don't quite have a handle on living these values out yourself, you're going to have a hard time passing them on and expecting others to do the same thing. So, like you said, maybe take 2024 to work them out, tease them out, practice living them out before you assign them to an entire team.
Pro Church Tools values. Value number 1. The family you choose. Described as, quote, relational longevity is our target, choosing to be in each other's lives through the ups, downs, and ever-evolving stages, toasting each other's triumphs, not abandoning another in grief. We know that not every relationship is for life, but often our need to make a living will force change upon us that fractures our closest relationships. We want to invert this. We work to live. We don't live to work, because family should never be collateral damage. So for those that are unfamiliar perhaps with the history of our company, I started Pro Church Tools in 2011-ish as a third-year student in Bible college. I was studying to be a youth pastor. I have a degree in youth ministry. Realized I didn't have perhaps the relational bandwidth to be a full-time pastor, but wanted to serve churches. That's all I cared about doing. And so a friend of mine was like, why don't you start like a blog? That's how he spoke.
Yeah.
We lived in Edmonton, but he was West Coast,
That's right.
stereotype Californian. And he presented the idea, Pro Church Tools. You're learning a lot as a media director at this new church plant. Like, you can just teach what you're learning. And I was like, cool. I love the idea of online business. That was really cool. So the first person we hired was my roommate in college. And then like the next 5-6 hires were all friends from youth group. And then we brought in a foreigner. Mm-hmm. This weird Italian bishop. Yeah. And, he really, frankly, messed up the vibes. But before that, point being is that when you mix friendship and work, and this happens in church a lot, because church is work, but it's also so intertwined with like faith, and faith is so intimate and so personal that even just the essence of working in church crosses boundaries that typical professions do not.
Sure.
And so we kind of have baked into the fabric of the company, the whole point of what we want is, unless someone decides to strike out on their own or move to a different country, the 2 transitions we ever had were one of each of those things. Mm-hmm. The guy was like, hey, I want to start my own company. We're like, awesome. Praise God, go do it. And then the other guy was like, I want to move to another country. And we're like, awesome. Praise God, do it. Yeah. Unless someone actively chooses to leave, the whole point is when we're 65, I want to be looking across this table at Alexander and being like, well, hey there. Apparently at 65, I'm 85 in this. Apologies. But that necessitates certain concessions, right?
Yeah, it sure does. And this is not easy to pull off. Whenever I talk about the complexion and the culture of our workspace here, I was just on a podcast a couple weeks ago, and I was telling this story. And again, we were talking about actually on that podcast working in church and the context of practicing faith with actual family and leading a church with family, and how that can be tricky. And like you said, there are some concessions that need to be made to do that effectively, and we're trying to do that here. And I think we're pulling it off, and I think that's rooted in the fact that this is like so clearly stated in our values. Like, this is the thing we're trying to do, and so to do that requires us to do A, B, and C, wherein other organizations may not have to. But this is the first one we're starting with. This is a big priority of ours, and that's why coming to work feels like so much fun for me, is because I'm coming to work with my friends who feel like family, and for us, that's a really big value here.
A couple important notes in the description of this value. The first is, in each other's lives through the ups and downs and ever-evolving changes. So the roommate that I hired, him and I lived together at the age of 19. We couldn't cook, and we would just order pizza most nights.
I could not imagine what that room looked like.
We would watch WWE and then go to class in the morning on no sleep. He works here today, 12 years later. Yeah. And last year, he became a father. Yeah. He's married. I'm married, 2 kids. We're both homeowners. We've worked together now for 12 years. Mm-hmm. Alex as we record this podcast, is still on parental leave with a second child. And things have been difficult as the stages have changed because we've had a certain way of doing things and it worked. But then that person is no longer that person anymore. Like, oh, I'm a father of two. I'm a father of one. I'm a husband. I have other responsibilities. You know, Alex and I have had to work that out in travel. Like we used to go all these places together.
Wherever, whenever.
And
willy-nilly, as they say.
And I remember when Alex had his first child, and I was so happy for him. But I sent him this skit. There's this skit. I don't know who made the skit, but there's this skit of this guy and his bro, and his bro is like, I had a kid, and his friend is like, yo, hold your guy back. And he starts beefing with the baby because he's like, this guy, he has barely known you, man. I've been here for 10 years. You know, he doesn't know you. This child doesn't know you. And, you know, to the point where Alex and I have a joke that like, okay, we're not planning on having any more children right now. Perhaps we can get vasectomies abroad.
That's right.
We call it the snip trip.
That's right.
Snip trip 2027. Like this is the only way we're going to get away from our children together. And we'll talk about, you know, oh, it's a season, you know, eventually our kids are all going to be in school. And that's true. But there's like this grieving and mourning period where you're like, we're friends, we work together, and we travel, and everything's great. And then we enter a new stage of life. And the stage of life is great. And this is what makes it bittersweet and challenging to work through. You're like, this is even better. There's a new life in this world. Like, Alex is a father of two now. I'm a father of two.
Yeah.
This is awesome.
You mixed a child in there somewhere, too. You popped out a second.
But I'll just leave the child. I have no qualms of I will go in and take the child, Grandpa. See you later. And so you celebrate it, but then you're also mourning like, okay, that stage of life as like young marrieds without kids is gone and it's never coming back.
Yeah.
But this is the family you choose. So how do you stay in each other's life through and in the new stage? Yeah. We also have in this description, we know not every relationship is for life. That's an important caveat because at any point, someone else can be like, hey, I feel like the next stage of life for me looks like this. People joined this company at the age of 21. Everyone moved here at like 21. It's not realistic to think that someone might not wake up at the age of 35 or 45 and be like, you know what? I'd like to try something different in my life. I only get this one life and I've always wanted to X. I'm going to go do that. Yeah. And that is something else that we want to celebrate. And yet also more in the fact that it is a new stage.
That's right. Yeah.
And then finally, we believe that this work allows us to stay in each other's lives. The biggest reason why we started this company was because I wanted my friends from college to just stay here. And now they can't leave.
That's right.
Got them. Value number 2, vibes.
Just simply vibes. This is what I was alluding to earlier, that maybe the language specifically for us may not resonate with your church, but that's okay. You can find it.
The description here. Productivity is not the highest goal. The bottom line is not the ultimate motivator. For what will it profit us to gain the whole world yet forfeit our souls? Practically, this could mean choosing a hybrid work week over peak efficiency or investing in memorable shared experiences instead of stashing a bit more away. Structurally, we won't sacrifice our collective well-being on the altar of private enterprise. So yesterday, I went to the bank and I had to send the wire for the rest of our owed amount on our vacation rental for the corporate retreat.
Yikes.
And you know, it's kind of like when I pay my taxes. And listen, I've had to pay some taxes to the IRS. If you're an American, I don't empathize or sympathize with you. But when I pay my taxes to this great country of Canada, there's always this feeling of, that's a lot of money.
Yep.
But there's also this feeling, and perhaps it becomes lesser every year, of, you know what though? I'm glad to live here.
Sure.
And I'm glad to, you know, contribute in my way. When I sent the wire for this vacation rental, I was like, it's a lot of money. And you start like just doing the quick math. You're like, if I put this in the bank today at this % interest over this many years, that would be this much money. And so there's always this opportunity cost anytime you spend money, but especially at this age, you could stash that away and it could tend to whatever, I don't know, 100, I don't know how many X's.
Many.
Interest is crazy over 35 years. Or I could burn it all for 7 days with the team here. And I say burn it all to basically frame it in the way that like sometimes our brains think that way. But like written in this value is we want to invest in shared experiences. You know, I've always believed that travel, and especially travel with people you love, is one of the most rewarding ways to spend your money. You know, if nothing else, for when the camera roll reminds you 7 years later, hey, remember when you did this? Like we all had that experience where you open your camera roll or Facebook and it's like, hey, this was what you were doing 7 years ago. And then the other part of that is there are moments where I'm like wanting to message someone after hours, or I'm like, okay, we need to like really work hard to get this out. And sometimes we do, but then a lot of the times I catch myself and I go, hey, the whole point of this value is like, you've chosen to work a certain way, but that doesn't mean your employees are choosing to work that way. And wait until they're back in the office, let's say. Everything will get done.
Is there something pressing that we need to work on that?
Yeah, we're recording a triple podcast right now, back to back to back, while you're on parental leave, you know? So apparently we're not abiding by this value today.
No, I committed to this. My parental leave is a perfect example of this, though,
Sure.
right? Like, and I often bring up conversations when we're talking about work here. I often bring up conversations that I have outside of work about my work with folks, friends and family who ask when they find out, oh, you're taking 3 months off. Like, how did you pull that off? And I get to tell them, well, like,
blackmail.
Well, no, it wasn't blackmail. I'm like, well, my boss happens to be my best friend, and he's a very generous person. And I work with my friends, and they were malleable in this way, and so they made space for me to do this. And they're like, that sounds amazing. I'm like, yeah, it is. And that's why this value, the vibes, although not my favorite title, is one of my favorite values that we have here. Because there's like, and especially the way you've articulated it here in the description, there's like this ecclesiastical, in the sense of like the book of Ecclesiastes, sense to it, which is, yes, there is one sense of productivity being the highest goal, capital gains being the highest goal, putting away as much for retirement as you can being the highest goal. And similar to the first value here, the way we're operating is it tries to invert that, is countercultural to that. It celebrates more like celebrating the fruits of our labor now, so that when we look back over the course of our work, it's marked by trips and by memories and by goodness and gladness, as opposed to just like how much money I put away for the future. This is a value system, or a value in this system that keeps our morale high at almost all times. It keeps us excited about the work we're doing, because the environment we're working in is catered towards our personhood as opposed to our productivity. And that's just really special to us. So yeah, the vibes.
The corporate retreat that we do every year, and this will be our second year, it's almost the cost of another employee. Not quite.
Right.
Like, it's like 75% of the cost
Right.
of another employee for 1 week. Mm-hmm. We were talking about this the other day, Alex and I, and we were like, hey, this is the second year, and everyone's looking forward to it a bit more. And we've done retreats for a long time, but this once COVID happened, we couldn't really go anywhere. So we've gotten back to these international retreats where we go to the Caribbean, and we were like, think about our kids. Like, every year, they're going to have this experience. So when we talk about investing money and like, oh, here's what it turns out into in like 30 years. Well, what does investment in us going away every single year and creating that work and family tradition, what does that investment turn into over the course of 5, 10, 15, 20 years?
Okay, at the risk of turning this into a 2-hour episode, I have to share this, because this is a perfect example of how these values contribute to the way you make decisions as an organization, as a church, as a team. When it came to the international retreats, when we were talking about what they cost, some of us, me included, in our team spoke up and said, hey, that's a lot of money. Like, can we talk about how we're spending this money, why we're spending this money? And if we didn't have values articulated, we would be kind of lost as to how to make a decision about should we do a trip like this scale. But because this is built into who we are, the culture of our team, we're able to say like, oh, we value this. And so this is, you are able to articulate, this is why, to you as a business owner, this is why this trip is worth this amount of money compared to what we would have done with this amount of money. So that's just a great example about how these values and the values that you're going to tease out with your team guide and shape the decisions you make about what you're going to do, what you're not going to do. Mm-hmm. That's just such a great example of how that worked out for us earlier this year. Mm-hmm.
Value number 3, say the quiet part out loud. Okay, this is one of those that feels great to write down.
That's right.
Feels less great when you get that after-hour Slack message, we need to talk, which still triggers so much trauma in me. Please don't say that. If you're going to say that, you're going to have to give me a precursor. You got to lay down broadly somewhat of what we're going to talk about. Otherwise, I won't be able to sleep at night. Description for this value. We value speaking plainly. This could mean talking openly in difficult situations, not shortcutting conflict resolution, or simply refusing to let bitterness simmer by letting things go unsaid. Fundamentally, we don't believe in trying to hide the real thing we're trying to say. So this is a necessity as a value from my perspective.
Yeah.
Because if you're going to have people in your life for 10, 20, 30, 40 years, there are going to be times where you have to work through conflict.
Yeah.
That is inevitable. I think in a lot of workplaces, you can use HR as an intermediator.
Yeah.
You can sidestep real conflict resolution by just being like, oh yeah, we're not about that.
Right.
We don't like her. Other less than savory terms. Well, that can't happen when like you're a family.
Yeah.
Otherwise, like the bitterness simmers, resentment grows, and things fracture.
Yep.
So this has been fun. I'm a pretty no one says they're a confrontational person. Everyone's like, I'm not a confrontational person.
Right.
Like it's like everyone's a visual learner. I'm just a visual learner. It's like I think everyone is like both of those things.
Sure.
But I have very much believed in living by this value. And so we have confronted many different things where we've been like, all right, let's get it out. Let's talk it through. The one you just brought up is a great example.
Yeah.
I was like, we're going on this retreat. Hope you like 5-star luxury. And everyone was like, what about the Lord? And I was like, what? I was like, what? And I was like, wait, what? And we talked through it. And I would like get in my car and I'd be like, what just happened? Like that. Why are people upset about this? Yeah. And we worked through it together. And then you have values, and then you can lean back on those values to say, okay, here's how we're making decisions. Like, okay, I don't necessarily agree always with the expression of that value, but I do agree with that value. And you don't always come to a 100% conclusion on everything. But say the quiet part loud has truly saved us so many times. Mm-hmm. And what it does is it builds the foundation for stronger relationships in the long term. I remember, you all know, I have 3.5 best friends. One of my best friends is 10 years my senior. He's a pastor. And when we were first starting to develop our friendship, we were away on a trip in Phoenix. And he like kind of came to me at one point and he was like, I've never really had a close guy friend. And I'm worried that like you're just one day not going to want to be my friend anymore. Like you're just going to be like, oh, now I know the real you. And I think every one of us can resonate with that feeling where like if I showed this person my real self, sure, they would not want to be here anymore. And we worked through that together. And then in the years that have gone by since then, this was maybe 7 or 8 years ago, we've often cited that as like, that was this inflection moment for our relationship. We're like, are we really going to go deep here? Or are we just going to kind of stay here? And for him, he had really only ever stayed there with people. And my wife had a very similar thing recently with one of her friends, and they kind of had their first real like conflict. And my wife, who famously is a people pleaser, like wrote a text and was like, no, I stood up for myself and I said, I see your feelings, but this is how I felt. And they came out of that a lot stronger. And I said, like, every relationship has to go through this moment. And once you have that in the rear view, you have the script for what your relationship is going to do when you encounter conflict. Because you're basically deciding in that initial moment, are we going to always just kind of sidestep it, or are we going to face it head on to get through it together? And this coded value is basically saying we are always going to face it head on to get through it together. Otherwise, the previous two values actually don't even matter.
That's right.
Because we can't live through them if we don't live this one.
That's right. Yeah.
Value number 4, clear the runway. Description is this: we're not naive. What we're trying to do here is ambitious, and the world's systems are not made to cater to this ideal. That means we're always forecasting what's to come and preparing to remove obstacles on the horizon. Basically, we never want to go back to the way it was before. So this value is an acknowledgement that the world systems and the way that things are constantly pulling us away from what we're trying to do. Right? So if you think
away
about
from those first 3 values.
Yeah, right. If you think about like, the scriptural value of like, the road is narrow, and be careful that you're not slipping off of the road, because it's very easy to think you're on the straight and narrow, but you're not. You're teetering off the edge. And so this is an acknowledgement of kind of the frog boiling in the water syndrome, where like you don't realize as the temperature gets up right, until it's too late. This is acknowledgement like you always have to recalibrate. You have to remeasure. You have to revisit these values and make sure, okay, where have I slipped? Not am I slipping, where have I slipped? Because if all the world systems are pulling you away from it, it's very easy to be like, last time we lived by these values, which means we'll always live by these values. No. It's a constant vigilance.
And you say it in the value that requires like foresight, looking ahead.
Clear the runway.
Exactly, into the future. Because it's often that when you're in the midst of something, that phrase hindsight's 2020. It's because when you're in the midst of something, you can't see it as clearly as you can when you look at it in the rear view. And so it takes proactive foresight to look into the future and say, okay, we are going to encounter A, B, and C. How do we prepare for that to happen? Or how do we prepare to navigate that so that we can maintain this sense of homeostasis that we currently have?
Yeah, and this also reflects on my desire to stash money away, right? Like when I was describing earlier, this lump sum could go towards the retreat for 7 days, or it could go to like the Forever Stash Fund. The Forever Stash Fund is not like only there for like riches. It's there for an indefinite runway. So when COVID happened, we had a cushion to lean back on. Well, what's the next thing that's going to happen? I don't know, but something's going to happen. And if we don't have that cushion, suddenly, and this is where a lot of us find ourselves, a lot of people are probably listening to this, watching this, being like, oh, it must be nice. For a lot of things, like, I don't ever want to have to make the hard decision between like this person or like continuing this company in this way. And so you have to have enough of a cushion so that the runway is cleared enough that when you have to spend a little bit more time on the runway before taking off, like you can just keep doing it before it just runs out of space and suddenly you're like, well, we got to take off or we're just going to crash.
Right.
2 more values here. Second to last, bring heaven to earth. Quote, we want to do work with purpose, the kind of purpose that affects positive life change around the world. We also believe that we have the agency to bring a little more light or a little more darkness into the world with every choice we make. So it doesn't matter how big or small, our aspiration for every interaction and every creative expression is simple, on earth as it is in heaven. You run a business, you do work. Alex can attest to this. It doesn't matter how much you love your work. Work is also just work.
Sure.
Maybe it's another customer conversation with a person that's aggravated. And so they come to you in a bit of a sour mood. And you don't really feel like, bringing your best. Or maybe it's like, I have to make another Instagram post.
Right.
Oh, the last few. People haven't resonated with them as much. I put so much into them. People weren't really feeling them. And you got to bring yourself to it again. And we are always reminding ourselves, every opportunity, this is a chance for us to bring a little bit more heaven to earth. And we don't know who this might affect on the other side of the screen. We don't know who or how this might affect who we're becoming ourselves. But this is the aspiration.
That's right.
And then final company value, yes be yes, and no be no. This is the one that we've added most recently. It reads as such, quote, people trust us. We hold that in high esteem. Keeping that trust demands that our words are pure and our actions live up to our words. And yet opportunity will always exist to stretch intent in service of our own interests. In light of this, our commitment is not to manipulate, sensationalize, overpromise, misdirect, or in any way purposefully mislead people with our words. We uphold and affirm this value through our actions. So there is a part to this that I will not disclose. But one way that this gets continually expressed is through the content that I create. There's this constant pull on social media to just dial up the sensational essence a little bit more because it will predictably translate to better performance. And that is very tempting. It's the dopamine hit of, if I eat this chocolate, it will feel good.
Yeah.
Well, will you ever eat chocolate and won't feel good? Well, if you eat so much that you puke, and there can be so much over-sensationalizing that you even feel gross about it. But almost every time, like, if I just dialed up the outrage a little bit more, if I did this a little bit more, it would result in more of what I know is good for the company or good for the performance of this post. But you have to be, you have to just manage that. You have to temper that desire within you, because in the long term, it's destructive. Even if in the short term, it achieves what you are wanting to achieve.
Right. And this comes out, like you said, in the content that we produce, whether it's YouTube videos or Instagram posts or how we talk about products or services that we do here. But this also comes out in interpersonal relationships, both within our team and with personal conversations with customers, just embodying people. These last 2 values are pretty thoroughly Christian. I mean, they're all pretty thoroughly Christian, but these last 2, are explicitly linked to some scripture references, like embodying being a person of integrity and people of integrity and using words that people can trust. That's a value of ours. And so it's easy because we sell things, right? We use marketing language, we do advertisements, and it's easy to look around in popular culture, in marketing and advertising and see language, see companies that you can't trust because of how they're talking. And so we're not pretending we're not trying to sell things. We sell things. And so in doing that, it's important and imperative to us that we are people of integrity with the way we talk about them. And so we built that right into who we are.
Right. Like one example of this is we sell things, and often we have launches of things with discounts or registration windows that have a hard end date. So this discount will expire at this date. Registration window enrollment will close at this date, which means that we're generating like scarcity.
Right.
But those are real stop points. So one point of integrity is that like you'll never like actually like find, oh, the price stayed the same.
Right.
I have yet to, and I hesitate to ever say I'll never do anything, but like I've never done that thing because I don't like it when like a discount ends and they're like, we've extended the window.
Right.
Boxing Day, sorry, Canada. Christmas holiday sale extended through January. And you're like, what?
Right.
Okay.
They didn't just make that decision. That was baked in the whole time.
Yes, absolutely. So we've never done that. But, you know, there have been times where I'm like, I don't know, like if I send one more email, it'll generate 9 more purchases. But like, will it also turn off like 900 people? I don't know. And that's especially in those launch times. Like I'm all in those final few days. It's like, okay, 50% of enrollments come in the final day. So I have to send these emails because people need a stop date, because if you don't have the exam due at this time and turn it in, it's not going to get done.
Yeah.
That's just human nature.
Right.
But also, you know, how many emails do I need to send on the final day? And how do I need to word them? Like I've crossed the line, I think, before, and I wish I hadn't, but then I'll also be like, it was required. Like sometimes like it's just about like, you don't really know.
Yeah.
And you're trying your best to live by the value.
Yeah.
I do take issue with one thing you said about like them not all being rooted in scripture. I think you're forgetting the minor prophet that uses the verbiage vibes. I mean, maybe just revisit. You might want to revisit.
Yeah,
that.
I don't spend a whole lot of time in the book of Zephaniah, so I probably overlooked that.
No, respect. Okay. I also have so those are the company values.
Yeah.
We'll get into the exercise here to develop your own. We found that in our content, a lot of times people just want to see what other people are doing.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so I can say, here's the social media strategy, 8 principles. And they're like, right, can you just show us what a church is doing? I'm like, well, it's actually better if you develop it. Just show us. Okay. So I also have my family values here that I think are a little bit more applicable to most people. And we can go through
Do you
these.
also print them out for your family like you print our values out for us?
No, the family values I just tattoo on my skin.
Ah, right. So every time they see you, they're reminded.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, yes, I will frequently, because there are a couple that are specifically for my children. I'll point to them like, this is the value. This is what this means. You know, I had a really fun moment the other night.
Come over here and kiss this tattoo.
Lord have mercy. There's one value, and I said it 2 days ago, and I started it, and the child finished it.
Oh,
and I was
nice.
like, let's go.
Got him.
Okay, so
Indoctrinated.
family values. The first one is every good thing, and these all have scripture references. So this is reference to John 10:10. Whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, dwell on these things. I'm aware that is not John 10:10, but that is the description for the value.
Yeah.
Basically, this is like our open-minded belief of like, hey, is there something like worth doing or worth experiencing or worth pursuing, or inversely, but to the same ends, worth denying ourselves of if it achieves more living like Jesus? Like John 10:10 is like, I have come to give life and life abundant.
Yeah.
Okay, life should be abundant. What is there for us to experience? We want to be open to all of those things. Every good thing. I have the words, every good thing, tattooed on the back of my knee. Lord have mercy, that was not a fun time.
I saw a chart on a social platform yesterday. I don't remember which one. That was just like, it looked like a heat map of a human body showing the most painful places to get tattooed.
I will reiterate this about tattoos. The ones that you think will hurt the most hurt a little bit less than you think. The ones that are meant to hurt the least will always hurt a bit more than you think.
And that's probably just
Pain is
the way you go into it mentally.
50% in your head. Like tattoos always hurt.
Sure.
Some will be like an 8, 9 out of 10. Some will be like a 7, 8 out of 10. But like, oh, your bicep doesn't hurt that much. Yeah, it still hurts.
Yeah.
Oh, your kneecap, that's going to kill you. Yeah, it just hurts more.
Yeah.
But like the baseline is high, but it's not excruciating at the very top. Nah. Personal value number 2, we can get through anything. Scripture reference, Matthew 4:11. I just have a quote here from The Hobbit.
Love it.
J.R.R. Quote, so comes snow after fire, and even dragons have their ending, said Bilbo.
That was one of the first big books I ever read.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is
Like
like
on
the,
my own.
the good chapter
Yeah.
book. I think that probably was one of the first that I started with as well.
Yeah.
Before I went into witchcraft and Harry Potter.
Ah, right.
Right. Personal value number 3, just keep trying and be a good friend. Proverbs 17:17. So this is the one that I have tattooed that I point to, and this is the value that my daughter finished the other day. So I have a tattoo of a little smiley face emoji going down a slide. This value, I've told this story before, was developed in response to dropping my daughter, firstborn, off at school. And I would tell her, hey, getting through school is not always going to be easy. In fact, school is going to be some of the most challenging parts of your life, almost assuredly. Just keep trying, be a good friend. Just keep trying, be a good friend. Getting back to the witchcraft. I say this glibly, okay? Look, I come from hypercharismania, all right? We talked earlier about like, will people like me if I show my true self? One of the, what I've come to realize, defense mechanisms I have for that is that I will very openly say things that obviously cross the line, basically to see how people's reactions are. In a way, and I heard this described by a therapist, perhaps this is why I'm doing it. They said this is the reason their clients were doing it, as a way of saying like, I'm gonna just be really out here. And if you'll accept me here, I know that you'll accept the real me. So you push the limit and you say something really crazy like, I'm not diving into witchcraft, but like you
Just
say
Harry
that.
Potter,
Yeah. Gosh, okay. Well,
All of our parents really did think it was witchcraft.
That's
though.
facts. Okay.
A quote from Harry Potter.
Yeah, well, the conservatives were like, this is too much witchcraft. Now the conservatives are like, finally, J.K. Rowling standing up for something.
Okay.
I'm just saying, right? Like how the things shift. Okay, we're talking about values here, people.
Yeah.
This is good stuff. So this is a quote from the Deathly Hallows, which is the final book in Harry Potter. Spoiler alert!
Don't
for
spoil
the
it. I still haven't read or seen any of them. I'm still a Christian.
Okay, but it's important. Okay, you know what? I don't have to say it.
Yeah.
So this is in the final book, and Harry says, "You'll stay with me," and then his dad says back to him, "Until the very end." So just keep trying, be a good friend. The quote there is longevity. We're just there, just being there.
Yeah.
You don't always have the right answer. You don't always like know what to do. You mess things up, but as long as you're just there, longevity wins in the end.
Your daughter's a good friend. The other night, Asher just out of the blue. We weren't talking about Lily. He goes, "Dad, I love Lily so much. She's my best girl." And then he just walked around saying, "I love her so much. I love her so much." So.
Well, your boy is a sweet boy. Next family value: be unoffendable. Where'd this come from?
Couldn't tell you.
Bishop Breaststroke himself.
I type it out quite a lot, unoffendable. And,
it's tough.
And autocorrect is like, yeah, that's not a word. And I said, I don't care. It's a value. So get on my level.
Autocorrect is, I wrote the other day Miles, and it just changed it to Mike apostrophe S.
Not necessary.
What?
Yeah.
Why? Okay. So description here: forfeit the right to be offended. Forfeit the right to be offended. Forfeit the right to hold anger. The cross offers a reminder of Jesus' willingness to pay the bill and an indictment on us when we are unwilling to do the same for others.
Wow.
That is one to reread and remind yourself
Yeah.
of. Next, we are all people in process. Bishop Breaststroke back again.
Wow.
This is 1 Corinthians 13:12. And the description here: try to be gentler with yourself and charitable with others. You don't know the things you don't know, and you may never know what someone else is going through. Next, graceful pursuit of a superior self. This is Hebrews 12:2. My description for this value goes, quote, each of us is in a battle with our physical form, first to master it and bring it to its full potential. Second, as we age and get sick, to arrest its physical decline. The body is a proving ground for the mind and soul. What are you willing to put up with? What can you do without? What will you put yourself through?
Wow.
This is something that I don't think we have a great sense of in the modern world, specifically in the West. I think that a lot of saints through the history of the church have had a great understanding of like the body and the fact that like, hey, this is not simply like a cage for the soul and the spirit, but like this has been given to me by God, and it's important for me. You know, Paul uses this in the run the race verbiage. Like it's important for me to master this so that I am not mastered by it.
Yeah.
This description here is actually directly from a book called Discipline is Destiny. Okay. I cannot take credit for writing that, but I put that in earlier this year because I realized like, you know, just so many of the carnal desires of life, you know, for me, it's mostly food, like just pulling me in directions and like me becoming a slave to that when I need to be master of those things and not let them have, you know, mastership over me. So coding this in here, I think it's just as spiritual as many of the others, because what I found is when I let like my body kind of like just do its own thing, the soul and the spirit suffer.
Yeah.
All these other things, like I need to feel my best and be at my best. I know what chronic pain is like. I know what it's like to like be in a brain fog. I know what it's like to get bad sleep. I know what it's like to say like yes to something carnal in the moment, and then afterward, the next day you're like, oh, I'm suffering. I'm paying the bill for what I did yesterday, and then all of these values get compromised.
Yeah.
Because you're not able to live them out in their fullest because your body's like, I just can't do it.
Right. You mentioned the saints. I think their embodiment of this probably had a lot to do with their belief about an actual bodily resurrection. That like this skin suit I'm in this is the thing that's going to get resurrected because we're going to embody like a new heaven and a new earth,
Right.
as opposed to, a more modern idea of like this cosmic future in the sky. A lot of saints actually believe like, oh no, like it's this thing that's going to be resurrected. I really could have used this language, this value, last night at about 5:14 p.m. when I was shivering, like clinging onto the side of a tree, waiting for a deer to walk by. I was having a bit of a pity party for myself. But I mean, what am I going to be willing to put up with to do what I believe to be a pretty like spiritual and Christian thing, which is like, if we're going to eat meat, like ethically harvest it myself. So I could have used this yesterday, but I'll use it. Hopefully I'll get it for another hunt next week. I'll use it next week.
Yeah, so we're still over out in the streets.
Yeah, it's not good.
Okay. Moving on. The compounding power of consistency, Galatians 6:9. Most people underestimate what they can do in 1 year. Pardon me. Most people overestimate what they can do in 1 year and underestimate what they can do in 10 years. That one's pretty self-explanatory, but my belief about anything to achieve, to do, to experience in life has to do with good small decisions every single day.
That's right.
Moving on. Plenty never lasts. Ecclesiastes 3 from one of our favorite Hillsong songs. Seasons, quote, like the frost on a rose, winter comes for us all. Winter is coming. We are in winter here in Canada. Praise God, we soon shall escape it.
Yeah.
But this is tattooed on my body in a little slot machine. And the point of this is similar to one of the previous values about clearing the runway. Something is going to come. Maybe it's a problem with your health. Maybe it's a global pandemic. Maybe it's the loss of a loved one. Maybe it's, some wrongful accountant thing that went wrong. Whatever it might be, either by your action, your inaction, or something that's completely out of your control. Yeah. So just remember that plenty never lasts. Inversely, the drought, the famine never lasts also. Two more personal values here. Freedom is the opportunity to exercise restraint. Matthew 7:14. Narrow is the gate and difficult is the way which leads to life. There are few who find it. This is an acknowledgement that we live in the most plentiful existence in human history. Yeah. We have more food, we have more money, we have more leisure time, we have more, and yet in all of this abundance, we are more lonely, more depressed, more suffering in many ways, suffering in the gluttony of having so much, more anxious. And so this is a reminder that like freedom is the opportunity to exercise restraint. So many people restraint was forced on them throughout human history. So many saints, restraint forced on them. We have to force it upon ourselves. Otherwise, we'll just become gluttons in the excess that exists all around us. And then finally, there will come a time when life demands something greater. Luke 12:48. Again from The Hobbit. Quote, go back, he thought? No good at all. Go sideways, impossible. Go forward, only thing to do. On we go. So up Bilbo got and trotted along with his little sword held in front of him. I said this to myself at the beginning of last January. There was things going on, and I was like, sometimes life demands something greater. I'm not ready for it. I'd prefer it not to be happening.
Right.
I don't think I'm at fault for being here. And yet, sometimes life demands something greater. So I always pictured myself, I am Bilbo with a little sword. And I don't really belong here. And I don't really seem to have a way out. But I can't go sideways, and I can't go backward. Onward is the only way.
Where is
with
Bilbo
little sword
tatted on your body?
I got the one where he like looks at the mithril and he goes, "Roar!" and he like screams. I have that just on my chest.
Nice.
Yeah, just Bilbo's face.
Life size, like life size.
Yeah, absolutely. Now it's a hobbit, so it's still kind of small, relative, but I have a very small head myself. This is maybe a point to encourage whoever's listening and watching. Like, you might be in a place right now where it's, life's demanding something greater of you. A lot of us find ourselves in that place, especially the more people rely on us, the more that we have children, the more that we have parents that have needs from us, the more that we have partners, the more that we have friends and family and extended family and people under us in church, people above us at church. Like, we're all being relied on, and then we have to take care of ourselves. Sometimes life demands something greater of yourself. Maybe you're neglecting your body. Maybe you're neglecting your soul or your spirit. Sometimes life demands something greater. You might not feel capable. You got your little sword. You're like Bilbo. Onward we go.
Well, listener, hopefully you have lasted to this point, because we mentioned right at the top, hey, there's going to be a framework for developing your own values. We have to clear the runway to get there. And through our shared work values and your personal values, we have arrived. And so, Brady, will you teach us how to develop our own sets of values for the workplace, for the church space, organizational, and even personal values?
Yeah, so there are 4 items here, 4 ways to develop these values. The first is in response to a challenge. Many of these values, for me, were generated in response to, all right, can't go under it, can't go around it, got to go through it, sort of thing. And that developed character in me, but it also developed a roadmap of, okay, when you face a challenge like this, how do you want to approach it, right? It's not about like what the challenge is or what the outcome is on the other side, but okay, this challenge is in front of me. It's personal, it's professional, it's physical, it's spiritual. What script do I want to follow to get through this? Second way is aligned with your DNA. So for me, the idea of longevity is in like more than half of these values. I went through it. And the reason it's more than half of these values is like before I ever even had like coded values like this, I would keep coming back to the idea of like, okay, just keep doing the right thing every day. Or like, compound interest is really good in finances. Oh, it must also be good in like habits. And I realized that was like just like key to my worldview and the way that I saw the world. And yes, it was inspired by scripture. We all have different emphases, we all have different like just focuses. And so you might notice like, in my own life, I always come back to principles like this one. Okay, that probably means that like you're resonating with it in like a unique and just personal way. And so how then might you take that and code it into a personal value? Third way to develop values, inspired by story, scripture, fiction. You saw The Hobbit was in here. You saw Harry Potter was in here. Like all of the great stories are often the Jesus story retold in fiction. But a lot of us get inspired by, fictional figures in movies, in books, in television shows and stories. Like that was the hero that had to face the biggest challenge and they overcame it. And how did they do it? They stayed true to themselves. They embodied noble virtues. They did the thing that the hero does, even when it comes at a great personal cost. And so you can look at those stories and let that become an inspiration for a value. And then finally, Bishop breaststroke articulated by someone else. Alex came into my life 8 years ago.
Yeah, losing count at this point. But
sure.
Yeah,
not quite a decade, I don't think. And said some things, articulated some things that I had never heard someone articulate that way before, but immediately resonated with me. So if you've heard me say something, you're like, oh, you know what? Brady articulated this value. I want to take it for myself. That's perfectly fine. Sometimes someone says it in a way, articulates it. You're like, oh, yes, I have observed that. I believe that, but I've never quite said it that way. That's a pithy way of saying it. Really great preachers are often good at this. And sometimes it can descend into like comedy where it's, a little too much alliteration or a little too many 3 points or a little too much rhyming. But often they say it in a way that becomes memorable. And when it's memorable, it can become actionable. And so sometimes someone else will articulate it for you.
Well, there you go.
16 rules for life. Hopefully some of these are valuable to you as we start a brand new year. And thanks as always for your time, attention, and trust. We'll talk to you real soon. One thing I very vastly underestimated, like how much height plays into like success in probably most worlds, but like the church world, you just never, like it's very uncommon that these like mega pastors aren't 6'2".
Yeah.
Because like you get by with charisma. Like charisma is such a big part of it. And then there's this like unspoken charisma from just you towering.